whole idea of starting your 1ARV group fits in with what has been an objective of mine for a very long time, and that is basically to take the reality of precognition, which has been scientifically proven by all the scientific methods, and it's a big disappointment to me as a scientist that the science has not picked up on this nearly as much as it should, because precognition is such an important aspect of time in our universe, and it's basically ignored. And they refuse to look outside their own box. And so precognitive remote viewing is just something which needs to get out in society and open society up to what I believe is going to be a new paradigm. And I'm now really quite anxious to get people to start new 1ARV groups for that reason. There are 4 guiding ideas here that are kind of around in terms of doing 1ARVing, really remote viewing in general, precognition. And the first one is coming from a position where you take the point of view. This isn't something you kind of argue. It's kind of a point of view, which is that consciousness is the fundamental aspect of the universe. You can look at it that way. The thing you know the most is this very now conscious moment. You cannot argue it. You're experiencing it. It just is. It's the fundamental. Things like time, space, energy, mass, our physical world really can be thought of as coming from some sort of consciousness being the fundamental. And yet we know that there are these non-physical aspects, the things like love, wisdom, beauty, joy, ideas, which are the spiritual part of life itself. And consciousness, life, all of this is the basics of what we're doing, and then we're getting to live our lives. Now, in terms of what we're doing with our precognitive remote viewing capabilities, the model is basically this one, and it's not really very complicated. We're remote viewers. We're a community here. We're talking remote viewing, and we know what remote viewing does. It uses our consciousness. When you do it not precognitively, you jump forward in time, and we take the point of view that we will be describing something we're getting as feedback. And we play up this feedback session. We light it up so that we can, in fact, share information back at an earlier time, looking at it in a linear sense. So that's the connection, the precognitive connection. Now, in between these two times, we have judging going on. We can do wagering money, time, whatever. There's an event outcome which causes the feedback. This is the whole basic idea. Sometimes people get confused about it. It turns out it's very simple once you accept the reality that precognition is real. So all you're doing is sharing information with the future. Third basic principle is that personal psychology is very important. It's the key. To be successful at this, there are just so many things that get involved. Be watching yourself, you have confidence. One of the most rewarding parts of all of this personally, and I think for most of the people who are involved in remote viewing in general and then applications like 1ARV, is watching your own inner being, your own inner psychology. And just watching that and observing it is kind of the pathway to getting rid of the blocks which are what's stopping cognition. And then wager wisely. We are doing applications, and our focus is right now on wagering in either sports or financials. But there are other applications of 1ARV. Is a missing person dead or alive? Rick and I were just talking about an application. Imagine if you had 20 yes-no questions and you felt comfortable 16 of them would be right, 80% of them would be right, but you wouldn't know which one. That's a lot of information that could be valuable to you, even though there's some uncertainty there. But you're now investing something, your energy. So you're wagering just by being involved in this. You're always wagering your energy, and you need to do that wisely. And the wisdom part of this is just around in what we're doing. But, you know, I'm sharing and others are sharing their perspective. Some of us have a lot more experience than others. But you know what? Ultimately, it's very clear to me at this point that you need to get to the place when you're doing this where you begin to trust yourself. You make your own decisions. You make this real for you in your life and self-realization. Okay, so that's, I believe, the mindset, the basic principles. What we're doing in 1ARV is we put together two unitary predictions. So one prediction, and we've been through a phase where this was frankly all that we were doing, is that you start out with the coordinate, standard remote viewing coordinate. You're going to generate a transcript. Your transcript is based on describing in sketch your feedback target for your coordinate. So there's a target 1 here. Is going to be, in this example, say the sailboat on the water with a little island behind. If this side, now by sides we're doing events which have two sides. We're doing financial events which might be up and down. We're doing sporting events which might be over a certain number of total points or under total number of points. We are currently always doing 50-50 type wagers. It makes the statistics nice and easy. We've just settled in on that. Obviously, you don't have to do that. But one of the sides, you'd strictly go for one side. You have one indicator photo site. If that side comes up, that's going to be the feedback you see. And if you get good descriptions of this, hey, you say that's the side to wager on. If, in fact, the other side comes up, then you would expect to get many different indicators from the transcript, and you say, gee, this must not be the case. And so if the other side, in fact, is what's actualized, group of transcripts. If this side did happen, I'd expect a coherent set of transcripts, and I could end off with one group transcript. So this is the whole idea of one unitary ARV prediction. If, in fact, side 1 does not come up, then what do? We still want viewers to have completion and to get a feedback, and that's what we now call a wild card, and we've paid a lot of attention on what to do with this wild card. But typically now people randomly choose one, but there's a lot more that can be developed here, and I'm planning on doing that in the future. The way we actually create a 1ARV prediction is we've now gone to having people take for one prediction 2 coordinates. One coordinate, which is just like the one we did before, which is associated with side 1, but then a second coordinate, which is associated with the other side. Mentally now, people go into these 2 knowing, and sort of you do this over and over again. This whole thing is set up to be something which you integrate in your life for the long time, that you're going to be getting back a group photo site. You don't know which one of the coordinates is going to be associated with, but you know you're going to be part of a coherent set, and then you also know you're going to be getting a wild card. So each of these 2 are treated independently, but as the judge, as a remote viewer, you forget about all this in between stuff. As a remote viewer, the remote viewers come in, they simply do 2 coordinates. They know they're going to get 2 feedback. One is going to be associated with the wagering side that actually happens. They're also going to get to see the evidence of coherence, why the judge chose that one which was correct. And then they will not see the side that doesn't get actualized. They will get a wild card. Now, so in summary, you know, there may be questions. I'm going through this. A lot of the people have already heard it. Some of your newbies, if you have questions, do feel free to ask.
Yeah, good idea. Give them a break and have it open to question time.
Yeah, let me do that after this summary, which is the way one prediction works is we have an indicator photo site on, so everybody for that coordinate will in fact have the same target, and we see coherence. So if you're interested in starting your own group, you would be the judge. And as a judge, you're going to see a bunch of remote viewing transcripts that come in that have a certain amount of coherence, and I'm going to show examples of that next. And the other target is a wild card. Now the person is free to make a decision and a choice, really, in advance of the site I have, where you do one click on this link and up comes a random target. So that's the approach there. And that's available, always comes available to anybody. Okay, are there any questions now before I give some examples and talk a little bit more about this and then get into exactly what's necessary to start a group? And there may not be questions because I have worked to have a lot of this information out there with opening up previous recordings and stuff like that, but especially some of the new people, if there's anything you want to write in the chat box as a question or...
Well, I'd like to say that unfortunately that I was having a lot of breakup during the first 2 slides, and so I didn't get anything what you said, but I will continue to follow along and catch up. I think once I see the examples, I'm going to understand how it works.
Okay.
So don't worry about me.
Okay, well, I'll worry about you a little bit because I'd like everybody to be really clear on the approach, because you're not going to go ahead and do the application. But okay, anyway, I appreciate your comment. So let us go forward. Here's an example of what I now call a AJ summary. AJ being analysis, judge, summary. So this is an example of the kind of coherence we see. The remote viewers in the group all had this as their coordinate. there might have been 5 or 6 viewers here. 3 of them gave this kind of coherence, plus others, but I like to show kind of the principal aspects. And so one viewer gave this sketch, which very nicely shows the downward aspect of this kind of skateboarding. Here you got the circles and the rims and array of materials, wood, steel, stone, rubber, feeling abrupt, sudden, certainly fits very nicely. Here we have a circle. The focus here is on the wheel. Not clear exactly what this person got, but certainly matched. Whether or not would have been willing to wager on just one of this wasn't, might not be clear as a judge. Seeing all 3 of them, putting them together as a single group transcript, which is the way I like to think about this in terms of making a group judgment, because the prediction is now shared with everybody in the group. This is a whole new way of doing it. In the old days, the analysts would be maybe military guys, and they use the information, and the remote viewers might not get any information back at all. Now, not only do they get a feedback email, but they get an email like this, which reinforces the feedback again. And then at the time of the prediction, where they don't see any of this at the time of the prediction, but what they get is the up or down associated with this side. And all that is shared with the viewers. And you do that as the person who's doing the admin work. Again, this comes from the perspective of starting a group. Now here's another example. So this was the feedback photo. Here are the supportive transcripts. You can see a number of people picked up the woman, picked up the arch back here, clear sense of, I think, water here, structure, something coming closer, people in the environment. This one got the perspective, hovering woman, smiling woman. So this one was very nice one, easy to judge. They're not all that easy. I want to introduce to you now something as a judge which was forced upon me. Turned out I was the one who basically had to face up to this with some other examples, but I want to show to you here in this context. This, again, was a successful target. This was looking at it with the normal transcripts, just looking at this target, people, noise, land, cluttering, cramped. I feel excited. Here was a person showing signs maybe of movement. Would these alone, I would have ranked this alone, yeah, certainly pretty good. Whether or not I would have been willing to wager money on it, I don't know, especially since I had, I think, like 5 transcripts to look at here, and this was the best of the one associated with this coordinate. However, well, and this one was associated with this coordinate too. Notice a different color. This was another person. But this one, brown, woodsy, grain, squeaky, gaps. I saw some association, but this one is certainly weak. You would never go along with this. But this was as strong as it was with this coordinate. And yet the other side, I'm looking at the other side, and I'm seeing things like audience. I'm seeing large crowd of happy people, stage and performance-like, center of attention, a drum major, ping, musical instruments. Now, as a judge, I and you, if you start a group, will have to face up to should you give that credit. This is called bleed through. with the 1ARV approach, I know I'm going to give feedback to everybody in the group associated with this coordinate. So I'm sitting here as a judge saying, hey, I know they're going to see this. It certainly makes sense, even though they're not supposed to, and I don't encourage it, because I really want people to train themselves to describe the correct target. But the subconscious seems to have a mind of its own. And to imagine the subconscious putting information like this out, even for the other coordinate, makes sense. And so indeed, I gave it credit, and I made a prediction on this side, and it was a hit. The only time I put together one of these AJ summaries is for a hit. That reinforces the whole process. So that's what bleed through is. And if there are any questions, okay, here's a question. Here it looks like 4 viewers on one target, but I thought earlier your slide said each viewer got a different photo. The each viewer getting a different photo is on the wild card side. In other words, let's take this example. All the viewers got this coordinate as one of their coordinates, but then they got another coordinate. I don't even know what that other coordinate is now. But there was a second coordinate. They provided 2 remote viewing sessions. All of them got feedback for this coordinate, all of them. For the other coordinate, they all did their own wild cards. So most of them clicked on that link I showed before for the other coordinate, and each of them got their own separate wild card for their targets. So that was for the other coordinate, because that was associated with the other side that did not happen, did not get actualized. Okay, great. Great, you got it. And so for the other side, that's where the bleed-through came in. Now, there may be other parts of their transcript that match the wild card, their individual wild card pictures, but they also did this. And so this is where I like to say, not only does the subconscious have a mind of its own, but the subconscious and displacement can be your friend.
Marty, I had a question about the bleed-through concept.
Mm-hmm.
In some ways, aren't we giving, now that we're acknowledging bleed-through, aren't we giving our subconscious now more official permission to use the wildcard coordinate to reinforce the group coordinate?
I understand your point. I totally acknowledge it, and that is out there, Chris. And yet, I believe this comes down to finding this place where you say, yes, I have to acknowledge it. Displacement does occur. The subconscious does it because it does have a mind of its own. It has its own kind of logic. The classical binary ARV approach, we never found a way to get around it. We tried for so many years. I tried for so many years in frustration. Others basically gave up the field. John Knowles was just about ready to give up the field, and convinced him to come back and to try this 1ARV approach. And now we're seeing less harmful displacement. We're seeing more of this bleed-through, helpful kind of displacement. And it's like, let's just go with the flow. Let's work to improve ourselves. Let's recognize that bleed-through can occur. Again, I don't want to encourage it because I want to encourage people to just go to their own target. But it happens. And let's just use it.
Do you think it could be due to the intensity of the actual target photograph that's being emitted, or what's there? It's stronger than the other target.
Well, remember, the other target being the wildcard target, which may not be as strong as this. Sometimes that could be part of it, though I don't always want everybody to think these targets have to be strong. I mean, that one wasn't that strong, because then it's a kind of front-loading. But I do know what you're saying. I think that happens. Plus, I think it happens because we do work very hard to light up the correct one. We talk about it. I send it to people twice. First in just a straight email with nothing but the target, and then I purposely go out of my way, and either later in the day or the next day I put together one of these AJ summary emails where this is in the email. And so we do put more energy into that one, and that may encourage it. And I must say, hey, look, we want, if that does encourage it, so be it. So that is part of the attitude. And that may be encouraging it. And right now the attitude is, okay, let's see, can you stop it? The bleed through. We don't know how. This issue of the subconscious having its own mind, your subconscious and the collection of subconsciouses, we're all connected. That's one of the messages here which we see. I mean, not only can we get information from the future, I just had a miss. The last two of our predictions in two different groups were actually misses. And one of them was a ranking of 7. I'm about to show you some information on the ranking of 0 to 7. And the old-fashioned kind of displacement happened. People gave a very good description of a picture they're never going to see. The only person that saw that was me. My working hypothesis is that for whatever reason, you know, and people know I'm the judge, people's subconscious are powerful enough to follow the transcript and get whoever the judge is. And I've actually tested that with people who didn't even know who the judge was. Your subconscious is extraordinarily powerful, extraordinarily capable. And for some reason, it can look at what the judge is seeing. And it turned out in our last miss, I have no doubt that they were looking at me when I was doing judging. Or actually, more accurately, the way I believe it works is when I was doing the judging, I put the information about that photo site out into this consciousness space. Consciousness is the fundamental. Hey, the matrix, Ingo Swann called it the matrix. Jungians call it the collective unconscious. That concept, it was out there. And for whatever reason, a few people's, more than one, subconscious chose to describe that target. So it can happen. So I do not know how to get rid of it. And I'm going to go one step further. I'm not sure I want to. There are plenty of really positive examples, including bleed-through. But remote viewing itself as an institution in the old days was funded partially because the subconscious described a super secret site that was not the target and got a lot of people's, you probably heard that story, and got a lot of people's attention. And that was
known as the haystacks.
Known as the what?
Haystacks.
Oh, yeah, okay. Okay, so I don't know how to get rid of it, and maybe we shouldn't. Our subconscious has a mind of its own. It's a player. It's a friendly. It's our friend. It's part of us. Let's acknowledge it, and let's take a look at the information it is providing. Okay, let's now get more specific. If you want to start your own 1ARV group, here's the way I see it as being what gets involved. You are going to be the center of this. You're the organizer. You're the facilitator, the administrator person. You would also be the analyst and judge. I can imagine having a separate facilitator. You can imagine this being separate, but right now these are all the same function. Now, to have a group, you really need 2 or more viewers because one of the real powers that we found here is this cohesion. You can feel really comfortable when you're getting different parts of the target from 2 different viewers. And as I've said several times, we're looking to get up to where we're really consistent in like the 80% hit rate level. So I think you really want 2 or more viewers. And I'll tell you more details about that. And then you're the one who would be responsible, the administrator, the facilitator, and then doing the analysis and the judging. Now, as the kind of viewers you want, you need to get the viewers who are willing to integrate this in their lives. The pace we're doing now is 2 viewings per week. We provide the 2 coordinates. It's very important that they take the time to do their best possible sessions. And so this needs to be integrated in their lives, and you'd like them to do each of those coordinates separate. You want to make these 2 entirely different events. They're focusing on the 2 separate targets. And then they need to get the information to you. In this day and age, that seems to be much less of a problem than it was several years ago. But nowadays, between the ability to scan or use your cell phone and take a photograph and send it off as an email, and a lot of people still simply use faxes. And I have e-fax, which is a great technique because it immediately turns it into a PDF file or something like that, and I print it out. I always print all of my transcripts out and work them manually. Not everybody needs to do that, but that's how I do it. So really, from the perspective of getting viewers, what I found is the hardest problem is first of all, to get their interest, get them to want to do this, and then to be able to get the time factor integrated in their lives. Now, as an administrator, from the administrator standpoint, you're the person, and again, you could have somebody else do this, but basically you need to set up a target pool. I like to call it a potential target pool because not everything in there will end up being a target. It's the indicator photo site. Remember, as a judge, you're going to be looking at a bunch of transcripts, and there will have been you will have chosen the indicator photo site for each side beforehand. So for one coordinate, in fact, maybe this is a good time to show you a bit of my spreadsheet. I wanted to actually do that, and I am very happy to share all of this stuff with you because I keep all this information on a spreadsheet. And so let me show that to you. So one of the things you need to do is choose the coordinates that you set out in an email. Well, I have random number generator. If I'm doing sports collections like there, you know, every time I hit F9, I get a different random number set. When I'm doing financials, I get the random numbers from here, and I go in and I say the next one, I happen to do it with the next one over under just because of the way my spreadsheet works. I have a whole collection of future indicator photo sites which I just keep up. I make this fresh. I'm actually not going to show it to you because some of you are in our groups and I don't want you to get front-loaded in any way. But what I have are now over 60 photos that I keep right here. And when I set up a new group organization, okay, like there's one that I've started here and I haven't yet put in the photos. This is for next week. I will go into the random number generator and first I'll get the coordinate. Now when I feel like putting in the IPSs, and all of that is done before I look at any of the transcripts, I will go in back here and I have 62 pictures. I will click my F9. I will then go to picture number 45 and I will use picture 45. And then I will put picture 45 associated right here, just like this was. And then I'll actually move this down under that picture, and then I'll get a second picture. But when I'm done with the okay, so I have two pictures here. When I get done, I always get rid of the one that's not here. I don't want to do anything to encourage the side that does not get actualized. So for a new one, I would have two pictures here. So this is an example of an older one. This was the picture which was actualized. I get the transcripts, and then as I'm judging them, I write the key words down, and then I rank them according to the TARG scale. I'm going to show you what that scale is. And so I keep a spreadsheet like this going. This, you know, you realize I do this sort of at the same time. I put the key words here and everything. But when I'm in the judging mode, I am not doing this to justify this to anybody else but me and put together the AJ summary. I want to have in my mind, why did I put together this one transcript that caused me to make the prediction over? So in this case, when I get done, I write here, over, I go out, this was a Major League Baseball game. I go out and I look at what the odds are after I've decided, okay, this is a 3.5 ranking, 0 to 7. The other ranking was a ranking as a group of a 2. Okay, notice these rankings were all pretty low. I ranked this as a group for 2. I ranked this as a 3.5, which is my minimum for tradable. I now would say over. I go out to my betting locations where I get what the wager is. It was over 7.5 points. I then go and I email that to my this particular group. In this case, it was the 1ARV group, and all they get is this line. I now have gotten the mode that in the email I actually give them, well, all that's there is this, the date, over 7.5, and then I give them the confidence rankings. When I send the prediction email out, of course, I don't know what the final score is. In this case, it was over with the score of 7 to 2, and it was a hit. So this is typical of my sheet, and I have these for, I'm managing 5 active groups now, and Chris is managing 1. So, and we're looking to get more groups going. Okay, so I wanted to show you the spreadsheet. So random selection, once you set up the whole potential target pool, and I keep doing that now in time. It does not come from the 7,500 that have been done over the last, whatever, 12, 13 years, 14 years I've been doing this. First thing you do is you send out the tasking email, which just has the coordinates and the due dates. So I usually do that like 4 or 5 days before it's due, because we're finishing off the previous one. Don't have to have it done completely, but I want the attention on the feedback, and then I switch over to next week's. And then you send, the next thing you do is, after you do the judging, now I'm in the facilitator mode, you send out what the prediction is after the analysis judging is complete. So as a facilitator, you send out that email, and then you send the feedback of the group target and its coordinates and the wildcard coordinate. When you know which one is actualized, you send back the feedback email. And in fact, you know what? I'm going to add it here to make it part of the formal one. You also send the AJ summary email. You can see I do a lot of this stuff real time. It's the only way I can maintain everything, and I hope you all appreciate that and don't mind it. The other thing you do as a facilitator is I like to do it either later in the day or the next day. I send out the summary email, which has a picture which shows the multiple support and potentially bleed through if that was part of what was going on. So that's what you do as an administrator. It takes time. As an administrator, you need to be willing to put in this time. I can tell you it is a lot of fun, and it is expanding. I am personally still growing and learning about my own consciousness, learning about consciousness in general. When you see everybody's transcripts and you see the way they get to see the target, you go, oh my God, look at that. And you just get more insights. Chris, I think you're enjoying it, aren't you?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. It is rewarding.
I also think it's helped my viewing too. Just seeing how the subconscious group works too, and I'm just learning not to be so literal as much and just looking at metaphor and just symbology better. So it's definitely great.
Yeah, beautiful.
I think metaphors have a great deal to do with our interpretation.
Absolutely, and we see that all the time. As you get experience in this, that's one of the key things you always look for is okay, is this the way this particular person's subconscious connected to the target? And that's what they put down on this sheet of paper. The other part is, and what you said about the viewing is so true. I happen to be a viewer in Chris's group, and I love it. And so it is fun. However, it does take the time. You need to be willing, and not only willing, you need to want to do it. I believe this positive attitude is an important part of the whole process. Now, we're getting into the analysis and judging, which of course is really key here. Most of this is very mechanical. In fact, the whole system, the way I'm using it, is set up as much as possible to be mechanical, except for the key aspects. And in fact, I'd like the remote viewers to be the same way, except for their key aspects, which is the actual remote viewing. Their remote viewing process is where kind of the magic of what they're doing is. And the feedback session, they need to pay a lot of attention to that. That's where you pay attention to. The rest, kind of mechanical. Yeah, you get your coordinate, you put the coordinate on top of the page. But when you're doing your remote viewing. The analysis judging is the non-mechanical part. This is where the magic as the analysis and the judging and the making of the prediction comes in. And so I want to talk a little bit more about that, and I want to show you the TARG confidence scale. I know many of you are familiar with it. It's not the only way to go. In fact, some of the CRVers have their own approach to this where they mark every element, and I would love to get another judge in here using that approach. But you need to have an approach. We use this approach where a 4, and as you see, I use 3.5s. You saw a 3.5 before. You get things like good correspondence with several matchable elements intermixed with some incorrect information. And a 5, we bring in, Russell Targ, this is his, brings in several, under 5, brings in unambiguous, good, matchable elements. You know, you saw examples of that where there was no question the person was connected. The odds of it being chance are very, very low. They're unambiguous, unique, matchable elements. And that could even be at the metaphor level because it's such a strong metaphor. And then you get up to 6s and 7s. I'm going to tell you something which is still a hypothesis, very difficult to prove. The miss we had with these 6s, for some reason, I see that too often. I think there is something going on that we have yet to appreciate in the way the subconscious works. I'm finding that when I get the kind of displacement that leads to a miss, so not a bleed through, they're often very strong. So, okay.
You know, Marty, this is Chris.
Yeah.
I'm seeing so many interesting things too, and I can't help but think that our subconscious is a trickster, and it doesn't want to take itself so seriously, and it's gonna throw a curve every now and then, just like that with the high scores. But there's I've seen it in some transcripts, and Deborah was we were discussing that too. That there's
he posits that just when you get on track, somebody on the other side, so to speak, comes in to throw you off deliberately.
I know. It keeps you humble, doesn't it? It's kind of remarkable. Yeah.
We could still hit 80%. We'll give them that 20%.
I think that may be just right. And yeah, and it may have something to do with a global Heisenberg uncertainty principle of some sort too, which this idea of the trickster keeping you humble, you know, we try to put words to all this, and it really keeps us, I don't know, there's the mystery of all this and the magnificence of all this, I guess, keeps us looking at the bigger picture. So there's something bigger going on all the time. And the idea of whether there's someone consciously, that was an interesting perspective, like somebody from the other side saying, you know what, I'm going to purposely give you a miss, or I'm purposely going to show you some good information on the wrong one. For maybe reasons that make sense for them, to try to get you to figure it out, who knows. Anyway, it's very clear that all of you appreciate that it happens, and I suspect as a judge it's going to happen to you too, so don't be surprised. Now, here's the other stuff. As a judge, and all of this looks intellectual, and I would say maybe it's hard to put a number on it, but maybe it's 90% intellectual. But even using the TARG scale with the words he used, there are judgment calls all the time in the process, leading to the final judgment of what prediction you make. And these judgment processes are strongly influenced by a kind of intuition, which is a combination of experience intuition and, I think, a precognitive kind of intuition of feeling. So that's an overall summary of what I'm finding as a judge. A lot of it is intellectual, but there's this intuitive aspect that's going on as well. And bleed-throughs, this goes in the direct evaluation, but you need to look for bleed-throughs. I consider bleed-throughs at this point to be obvious. I mean, I never am I on the lookout for the subtle ones, a few colors or something like that. Then I'm trying too hard to make it a bleed-through. It's got to hit me over the head for me to call it a bleed-through. So that's my idea on bleed-throughs. Again, you as an analyst judge, and this is the potential as we can keep this growing and we keep talking to each other, I think people are going to be doing it in their own styles. They're bringing their own subconsciouses into this, and you'll be doing this differently, and hopefully we'll be sharing information and insights. Then what you do is, after doing them individually, you now, and frankly, I used to actually lay the transcripts, and as I told you, I print them all out, and I circle the parts that I like on each of them, and I used to put the transcripts on the floor, or I'd go downstairs on a table. But now what I found is that by the notes and just the fact I'm so familiar with it, I have a good sense of what the one group transcript will look like and how I judge it. But then you come up with a group confidence ranking. You look at the two, and then you make a group prediction, and you do your email. And then you need to keep the data and statistics, as I showed you. That's what's involved. So far, it's working quite well. These are the latest statistics, and I'm going to end here trying to encourage you to take this approach and go for it. But with the various groups, we have a 69% hit rate. The odds against chance are like 9,000 to 1. It's interesting. The odds numbers changes pretty dramatically with a few hits or misses. This is the way the curve looks. Back here someplace is where we had the IRVA conference, and where I started talking about this, and it said 80% long-term rate as my goal, and I crossed over it. I feel really good about that, much faster, frankly, than I sort of mentally had in my mind. And I have to tell you, and this is kind of scary that I'm going to tell you this, but I am, that I almost think some of these last misses was because I did have this feeling that this was happening too fast. I mean, if you think about that a little bit, I am putting out there then in this consciousness field kind of a negative. Too fast. Why? Do I not believe that I can be up to 100% right now? Well, the reality is I didn't. And so maybe in some sense I passed that on to the viewers. And maybe in some sense that was why we got this high 6. So you begin to see, and I'm sharing with you as a judge, the kind of things that go on in the judge's mind, the facilitator's mind, who is kind of organizing all of this. and it's fascinating to watch yourself. I'm going to stop here, and as you now see, I am very anxious to encourage this. If you have any questions, fire away, and I'll do all I can to help you start your own group. And I hope that we'll keep doing this in a collaborative, positive way, because I believe that'll just simply help us all move into this next consciousness paradigm.
Hey, Marty, I have a question.
Shoot.
Okay, so regarding what happened last week where for the over and under score, it turned out to be right on the number. And so I know with the overall process that would be considered a pass, but it seems like there's not really a great option for the viewer's consciousness when that happens, because well, I guess basically we're just viewing whatever we're going to be shown, but then there was confusion about what was going to be shown. So what do you think of that?
What I think about it is that you summarized it exactly right, and I'm still struggling with that, frankly. The very first time that happened, and this is a case, frankly, when you wager, there's something called the push. When the over and under is an even number, like 7, and the game ends off with 7 points total between both teams, you get your wager back. You don't lose, you don't win. But now what do? The first time I did it, I gave everybody back the picture which they had judged the rest, because I wanted to encourage them all. The second time, I gave them the one which had been the predicted one, because it wasn't a miss. And that's what I do now. In other words, if I went ahead, I treated it from a feedback perspective as if it was a hit. Since most of the people went along this particular direction, I gave that back as feedback. And I, in a private email, told the individual person who did a good job on the other one that they did a good job on the other one, which I don't do when it's a displacement, but I do when it's a push. You're getting down to these subtle areas, Deborah, and I don't know exactly what the right thing to do is. You know what I mean? I don't know if there is a right thing to do. This is in this little fuzzy area, and you frankly simply deal with it in the way that you feel is best.
I think we could.
Now, would you consider in the overall statistics, do you consider that, I guess you'd consider it just a pass?
Yeah, I consider.
But and so that wouldn't like lower the overall success rate, or
That's
would
correct.
it if okay.
No, it doesn't lower it. It doesn't raise it. I consider it a pass. I'm doing this really on the conservative side. You know, if you look at it from a money wagering standpoint, you didn't make any money, but you didn't lose any money. And so I consider it a pass. Notice from the individual remote viewer's perspective, they still can learn as much from this one as from anything else, because they do get back. You know, Chris gave you back a feedback, and you still have your wild card.
Yeah, and I was very glad that he did that too.
Yeah.
Because as a viewer, if you don't get your feedback, you somehow feel, cheated, or just like like you're missing out on something. So
Absolutely.
I think you're handling it well.
I think we could avoid this too by, when we're wagering, is stay off the round numbers, because I know that I'm not familiar with all the betting arenas, but you could hedge your payback higher or lower by going a half point up or down. So in the future, we'll stay off of the whole number.
That raises other issues, but you can do that. Absolutely. In fact, you can even, as the facilitator, you could do it arbitrarily, but then you couldn't go out and find that at one of the wagering sites, though some of them will let you pay extra and get the extra half point. But there are other approaches here, and that is a perfect example of the kind of thing that the facilitator, the admin person, needs to deal with. So,
okay.
Yeah. Other questions, comments?
Nathan, I had a quick thing. When I had, of course, I don't do a lot of ARV because I got turned off early because of the displacement. So when I first heard about 1ARV or unitary ARV or whatever the name was, I kind of came up with my own cue, and I don't know, there's probably problems with it, but I pasted it in there. And what I would do is I'd just have a TRN of a photo, and I would have on the left-hand side a state, and I do have a little arrow dashing driven inside the TRN of the photo. And there was no, I guess I didn't really specify a wildcard photo for that. I assumed that maybe my subconscious would pull up its own wildcard, so to speak. How is the Q format, and you may have covered it, I probably need to sit through another webinar. How is the Q format set up for 1A? What does it look like?
I'm having a little trouble hearing you, Nathan. Ask that. I got most of the first part. Ask the question again. How does the what?
How is the queuing? What is a queue for a 1ARV task?
Oh, my queue is, and I tell you, it's so funny because when we started out, we paid so much attention to it, and I know a lot of people still do. My queue that I recommend is very simple. Describe and sketch my 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 target, period. And the target, sometimes I say feedback target to myself, and that's because by the time you do this for the long term, you know what you mean by target. And you just, so that's what I use as a cue. Joe McMonagle just used to use, he would say people would give him all these fancy and tell him different things, the taskers would come in, and he would just simply say, give me what my tasker needs, something like that. You know, you need to go in with something like that. You want to connect it up with the right target. So that's simply all I use for the cue, and that works for both coordinates. So, you know, I say the coordinate number, and I like to say the coordinate number out loud, and I like to say the coordinate number out loud at feedback time. It's a kind of a beacon. I've talked a lot about beacons, but even saying the coordinate out loud is one type of a beacon.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Okay, got time for one more. I do try to keep these down to an hour. I've got the rest of my life. Turns out I've got a tennis match today.
Good presentation, Marty.
Okay. Well, thank you. Thank you. But are there any other, one more question, comment? Okay, I think we have done it. I thank you all. I thank you all for coming, and if you do have any additional questions, comments, I am really always available by email, and I will have another one of these next Friday. So come on back, and we'll talk more then.
Thanks, Marty.
You're welcome, and thank you. Good. Bye now.
Thanks. It's a shame that Alexis couldn't have got on there.